It's time to meet our guest Gagan Gupta. He's behind the NCOC Special Economic Zone in Gabon, which you had the opportunity to discover in Business Africa last week. He explains how this model is enabling the creation of an effective industrial ecosystem and is changing the game for Africa's industrialization and exports. I met him in Libreville to better understand his vision. Hello Gagan Gupta, thank you for welcoming Initiative Africa here in Libreville.
Hi Asha.
Well, African countries are facing many challenges as high unemployment, lack of local processing, global warming. How can the industrial parks developed by Arise IIP help to meet these challenges?
So, Arise fundamental objective when we created Arise was to meet three global challenges. One was around unemployment, second around income inequality, and third about preserving nature and Mother Nature. We believe for long Africa has been exporting raw materials, and when they export raw materials, it's like exporting employment. When you import finished products, you are actually importing unemployment, because when you export say a raw cashew or a raw timber, you keep only 5 to 10% of the overall value and there's no jobs being added. When you start transforming the product within the country, then you add the jobs, and also that does three things. First, when you are adding value within the country, then the owner of the resource, for example the farmer who's producing the cashew, gets the right price because you're eliminating all the middlemen in between. Secondly, in the process you end up creating jobs. Thirdly, from a Mother Nature perspective, all these products were actually going to say Asia and coming back to Europe, so creating the carbon footprint. So by industrializing within the country where the resource is being produced, you actually address all the three problems. And a live example is Gabon, which used to export round locks you visited this morning, and that was hardly creating any jobs. Now you saw this morning that the round logs are being converted into veneer, into plywood and furniture. About 10,000 people come to work in the industrial zone, and that's a good example how industrialization can help solve these three challenges.
How do Arise IIP economic zones contribute to the industrialization of the African continent?
So I think we have to understand why the industrialization was not happening before, and what are the key bottlenecks why the industrialization was not happening. So if you look at Gabon or if you look at Benin, these countries have been exporting raw material for hundreds of years. And just because we are going to build an industrial zone does not mean the industrialization will happen. And we have to really understand the reasons why it was not happening. So if you look at say a Gabon or a Benin, what was typically happening was these raw materials getting exported raw. And why was that happening? Because there was no ecosystem. And what I mean by ecosystem, so there was no policy framework. So the countries didn't have clear laws as to what is the SEZ law, what is the law around transformation. So we work with the governments to create the policy framework, what I call as the soft infrastructure. The second part is we build the hard infrastructure. The hard infrastructure is about roads, water, electricity, effluent treatment plant. So when as an investor you come, you have all the common infrastructure ready, you can plug and play and start your industry. The third thing that we solve for is logistics. Typically in most of these countries, logistics was a bottleneck. So every industrial zone that we go, we end up building a dry port, we end up building warehousing, such that the customers, when they come, they don't have to invest in the infrastructure. Fourthly, we plug all the gaps that are required from a training perspective. So we realize that, for example, if you're transforming timber, then we need people to be trained in timber sector. So we build a vocational training center where we can train people into timber sector. When we go to Benin, where we have built an industrial zone for cotton, there we have a training center training people on garmenting. So then we fill the vocational gap also. And by addressing all these four gaps, we actually ensure the industrialization can take place.
What strategies are being deployed by Arise IIP to ensure long-term sustainability in value chains?
So one of the key differentiators for all the industrial zones Arise is building. So we're building 10 industrial zones in Africa currently, and our key focus and key differentiator is sustainability. So sustainability for us is not a tick box, but it's very much ingrained in our business model. So right from the time the raw material is sourced from the farmers or from the forest, we ensure it's fully traceable, verifiable, and we can actually go down to trace down which farmer it came from or which GPS coordinate the product came from. So that ensure that you can trace the raw material. Secondly, for all the value chains that we operate, we do what we call as life cycle carbon assessment, which means we measure what is the carbon impact of this entire value chain, and we compare it to what was happening before the transformation was happening in the country. So if you look at say a cotton or a timber, we say earlier this timber from Gabon was going to China and coming back to Europe. What was the carbon footprint versus now getting transformed here and going to the end market? And all the value chains that we participate in, we ensure that there is a reduction in the overall climate impact and the carbon impact when compared to the past. Secondly, all the industrial zones are focused a lot on circularity. So this morning you would have visited the industrial zone you have seen. Before we came and built the industrial zone in Gabon, the timber utilization, so when you put 1 cubic meter of log for transformation, you were only using 40% and the rest 60% was going waste. Today, because of the industrial zone, that has increased to over 80%. So even the waste you would have seen is now getting converted to particle board. That's a good example. Or you would have seen the plastic bottles being used as the packaging material. So that's how we have ingrained sustainability into what we are doing.
Since the launch of Arise IIP's first special economic zone in Gabon, many new zones are now under construction or under development in more than 10 African countries. What are your ambitions?
So currently Arise is in 10 countries. Out of that, we have Gabon. The Gabon industrial zone is focused on timber and it's currently operational. We have Benin industrial zone, which is focused on cotton, soya and cashew transformation, that's operational. We have Togo, which is focused on cotton, which is focused on soya and other agri products, that's operational. We have Ivory Coast, which is under construction. We expect it to be operational towards the end of this year. We are in Republic of Congo, which is focused on timber. We expect it to be operational this year. Then we are in Chad, in Nigeria, we are in Sierra Leone, and we expect that most of these zones will be operational either Q4 this year or Q1, Q2 next year. So fundamentally, Arise vision is to ensure that each country focuses on transforming its raw material within the country and building industries for import replacement. So in the current phase of development, which ends in 2024, we will be operational in 10 countries. Post that, we will start about another 5-6 countries in 2025. So our long-term vision is that we should be present in about 18 to 19 countries by end of 2025, and ensuring that by 2030 we have achieved our objective of creating 1 million direct jobs and adding close to $100 billion in additional GDP in Africa.
In your opinion, how does the current context marked by the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, the impact of the Ukraine war and climate change reshuffle the cards of the global value chains?
I think last 2-3 years have crystallized what was happening for last 10 years, but has really accelerated the realignment of global supply chains. And I'll put all the changes happening in probably 3-4 key buckets. The first bucket is around climate pressure. So if you roll back 10 years back, there was no discussion about climate in the supply chain. The discussion was how my supply chain can be the most cost efficient. It was not resilient. Today the discussion is changing and saying, is my supply chain sustainable? Which means people are now beginning to factor climate in the decision. The second change that is happening is, if you look back 10 years back, any boardroom discussion was around what is my China strategy? So how I'm going to be present in China? Today discussion is what is my China plus strategy? How will I have sourcing away just from China into multiple countries? So the whole supply chain is getting away from cost efficiency to resilience. I think during COVID, as you rightly pointed out, we saw that about 90% of masks was just coming from one country. The second big change that is happening is, earlier the European US countries were not so much focused on sourcing from Africa. Now as they start thinking that they need to start sourcing from other parts of the world, that's changing. The third thing that is changing is the demographics itself. So if you see, China is decreasing labor, the per capita GDP is increasing. So some of the industries which were viable in China are no longer viable, and those industries will move to different geographies. And we have seen that in the past. If you look at in the past, the entire textile industry was in UK, then it moved to China, and I think textile industry will move away from China to other parts of the world. So I think the confluence of things that happened in last 4 years is accelerating shift of industrialization away from Southeast Asia to Africa, or I would more put it to where either the resources or where the consumer is. So supply chains are moving towards nearshoring rather than offshoring what is happening in the past.
Industrialization has never been seen as an appealing sector by many young people. What about the youth? How are you attracting talents? This morning I was in a factory in the special economic zone, and I saw that there were young school boys and girls discovering how people were processing the wood in the plants.
I think what you've raised is a very fundamental question, because today, if you look in sub-Saharan Africa, there are about 29 million people who do not have jobs, and that number is going to go to about 120 million people in next 6 years. And it's so important to create jobs at all levels, because you will not just have jobs for engineers or for technical people. You will need jobs at all levels. And we have to realize also, not all these people are going to be engineers when they come out of colleges. So what we focus as a company is to create jobs at all sectors. And it's very important that we educate children about the importance of this. So we run various things. First, we run vocational training institutes that allow people to actually learn the jobs and the skills that are needed in this industrial zone, so they become employable. Secondly, at early age, we take college students to visit industrial zones and see that this work is also equally important for the country, and it's part of the overall value chain that allows people to appreciate it. And my belief is that we have seen in, we did an advertisement in Benin to attract people to, for an opening to train people. The advertisement was to recruit 1,000 people, and to our surprise, 126,000 people turned up. So that shows that there's enough and more people wanting to come and work in this sector. It's just a question of ensuring that they get the right information and they get the right pay.
What about made in Africa on the international markets? African products have not always been promoted and marketed to be seen as high-end items. What is your take on that? This morning I also visited a very high-end luxury product store.
So I think you have raised a very important and question which people ignore, is that today Africa itself is going to be a massive market. There's a massive demand within Africa, and most of the time people are just focused on exporting outside of Africa. So as a company, we focus on two things. First, we see what we can export within Africa, and secondly, what we can export outside. Now I'll start with a good example. So we built a soya plant in our industrial zone in Togo, and everybody said, oh, we'll export into Europe. And to our surprise, the soya meal is now getting exported to Ghana. Ghana used to earlier import this product all the way from Argentina. So there's a massive demand that is within Africa, and our industrial zones are also looking to cater to that. Now coming to your question, so we are very focused on putting African brands on the global scale, and that we started with Akiba. Akiba is our furniture brand that we opened the first store in Miami this year, in US in Miami this year, and then we are looking to now open in other parts of the world. I believe it's a journey, it will not happen overnight. So it's a 5 to 10 year journey, and you have to make some beginning. As you start putting the right product, as you start putting the right marketing, and more importantly, these products are very sustainable and traceable. And therefore, we strongly believe that in times to come, made in Africa will become a much more demanded product.
And what would you like to tell the European companies watching us about what's happening here?
So I think a lot of times people ask me the question why European companies are not there. I think we also realize why European companies are not there, because these products that we are transforming traditionally were going to Asia for transformation. They were not going so much to Europe for transformation. So if you look at timber, about 80% timber exports were happening to China or to Asia for transformation. So it's but natural that those companies are coming and setting up here. But what I want to tell to European companies that these industrial zones are very important for success of these countries. And secondly, as companies, they have so much technical know-how, so much expertise that they can share with companies here and create nice joint ventures, and more importantly, take these products back to their markets and have healthy returns. So I would say that these countries are open for business, and more importantly, in our industrial zones, we create an ecosystem where you can get everything sorted out in less than 2 days, and you can start your business in less than a month, and more importantly, get the right returns in a very friendly manner.
Thank you very much, Gagan Gupta, for your time.
Thank you.